My name is Shelby, and normally I make Flosstube videos where I show off all of my knitting and cross stitch and other craft projects, but today we're just going to be doing a tutorial for the Just Nan Gingerbread Reindeer Mouse. I stitched this in a stitch along with Allie from Misfit Stitches, and we're using the hashtag Naughty or Mice Sal, S-A-L. I'll go ahead and put that on the screen right here. And so if you are stitching along with us, or if you have ever stitched any of the Just Nan mice, I hope that this tutorial is helpful for you. I am by no means an expert, but I have finished one of these before. So I hope that this is helpful for you, and we'll just go through it step by step together. Obviously I will be going through this one specifically because this is the one that I have stitched, but the general construction of these mice is the same for all of them. So even if you didn't stitch this one, hopefully you can still get something out of this. So what you'll need, obviously you'll need your stitched piece for the Gingerbread Reindeer Mouse. I've already added the beads, and I also added the antlers on as per the instructions. Other things that you'll need are, you'll probably want some fabric scissors. Other scissors will work as well. I also have my embroidery scissors here. You'll want the little packet that came with the pattern. So specifically for this one, you'll want the hanger, the brass button, and then the little nose. You'll also need whatever DMC floss that is in the finishing instructions that came on the back of your pattern. So for this one, we need DMC 434 and DMC 321. I also grabbed this Sulky floss for the whiskers, but you can use any heavier sewing thread, or actually I have just used DMC as well. Your whiskers won't be quite as stiff, but it'll work. You'll also need some cotton batting, or any type of batting will actually work. Or the instructions say that you can also use cotton balls. You'll want to have a needle handy. I also have some glue and some toothpicks because we might need those. I have a ruler, but you might not need that. I'm just a little bit obsessive about cutting out my things. This is my ruler that I used when I was in elementary school. I also have a water-soluble pen, but same deal. You might just be able to eyeball the markings and not have to do it. The one thing that I don't have that the instructions call for is a straight pin. That is used to attach the nose, and I don't have any straight pins, so I'm going to be trying a different method, and we'll see how that goes. So stay tuned. But if you have a straight pin, I think it'd be a lot easier to attach it that way. All right, so let's get started. So I'll move my stuff off to the side here. First thing that we need to do is to measure out 3/8 of an inch on all of the edges of the design. It says to lightly mark the lines in pencil. I have the water-soluble pen, so I'll be doing that. And you could probably just eyeball this if it's not perfect. I don't think it's going to ruin everything, but I like to be precise. So we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so I've lightly traced that outline. It doesn't need to be perfect. That's just going to be your seam allowance, but having it neater usually makes it easier. So now we're just going to go ahead and cut along those lines, and we'll be ready for the next step. So now we have our little mouse body cut out. So now the next step is going to be to finger press the straight margins on the inside. So that means you're going to want to take this little edge and just fold it so that it's in line with that back stitch that you did before. Okay, so now that we've finger pressed our edges together, the next step is going to be to sew the sides of the mouse together. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to use a strand of either matching sewing thread or the DMC 434, and we're going to slip stitch all the way through these the little back stitch lines that we did. So I've already got mine threaded here, and it asks us to start at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and come up through the back so that my little knot is hidden, and putting the wrong sides together, so that means that folded edge, we want that pushed together. We are just going to slip in and out of each of those. you can see now that we've slip stitched the edges together, pull that thread tight and it'll bring those edges together, and you'll get kind of this nice little like zigzag line from the back stitches that are pulled in. So now you're just gonna wanna take your needle and kind of weave it back down through that center seam. And you can do that pretty invisibly just by going on the inside. And I'm just gonna do a little extra grab at the top here just to make sure that my top doesn't start to come looser. And now I'm just going inside of the seam, and I'm just gonna kind of weave my way down. All right, and then we're gonna wanna secure that end. So I am once again gonna poke through my side here, and I'm just gonna tie it to where I started. And now we can trim that end. All right, so if you're following along on your instructions, we are now at step 4. So we're gonna press that inner edge in again, and this time we're gonna take a really long piece of that DMC 434 or sewing thread, and the instructions recommend it be about 2 feet long, so we're gonna go ahead and do that now. All right, and we have 2 very long strands of DMC 434. We're gonna thread that through our needle, and again I'm gonna tie a little double knot at the end of my thread. And now we're gonna take small gathering stitches. So this was the part that was most confusing to me when I was making my first one. I saw some people were using this back stitch line, but I think that is meant to be more of a guide. So I am not going to thread it in and out of the back stitch line. We're just gonna take small little scoops of the fabric, and we're gonna do it that way. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So again, I'm coming through the back to hide my tail. And I'm just gonna take like little scoops right along that back stitch line. So just kind of like in and out, because what you're gonna do, this is sort of like finishing the back of a hoop if you've ever done that. You're gonna take that and you're gonna pull the center in tight to make it into that little berry shape. Kind of like how when you're trying to secure your fabric on the back of a hoop, if you choose to do it that way. So right next to that back stitched line, I'm just doing like a running stitch around. So I just finished doing that little running stitch right against the back stitched line. And now don't end your thread yet, keep it on the needle because you're gonna need it again. But now we get to stuff our little mouse. So just make sure you are stuffing it not too firmly, but relatively firmly. You want it to hold its shape, and make sure you're getting stuffing all the way into the little nose. It can be helpful to use like a chopstick, or I'm gonna use this little end of a toothpick to really make sure my mouse is nice and stuffed. And now you're just gonna pull. You're gonna wanna try to keep the ends of your fabric a little bit tucked in. But you're just gonna pull on your thread until you have just a little tiny mouse butt. And you can see that that's nice and tight. So now we just need to secure that end. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do like a few little over stitches here, just to make sure that that stays super tight. Okay, so now I've secured my ends. That's nice and tight still. Now we just need to kind of like weave in and out to get to the middle point here, which is going to be in line with that little eyelet. And generally these patterns will tell you, the instructions will tell you what the midpoint is, but you can also just refer back to your pattern and see where the midpoint is. Okay, so I am right about at the midline now. I actually went a little past it, but I think it'll be okay. So now we're gonna attach the wire hanger, which is this little curlicue piece. What you're gonna do is you're gonna insert the small curled edge, so this one, not the one with all the curlicues, into that center of the gathers. And you want it to line up so that it's straight in line with the center of the mouse, because this is going to be like your hanger. So if it's off center, your mouse will hang off center. Now that we have our wire hanger inserted, you're going to overcast the tail with your little threads. So basically we're just going to be using our needle and going over the tail and picking up a little bit of the fabric as we go. And you want to keep that close to the tail as possible so that it doesn't have a lot of space to move. All right, so now our tail is overcast on. Hopefully you can see what that looks like. So I just did, I think like 4 or 5 little over stitches just to really hold that tail in place. Mine did move so that it's not perfectly centered, but it's close enough that when it's hanging you won't see. So we still have our thread attached, and now we're gonna sew on the button that came with the kit onto the base of the mouse and try to cover up that hole. So I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna try to come up in that button, and then I'm just gonna sew every time there's a hole, but you gotta make sure that you're grabbing some of the fabric as well. So kind of just like you did with the tail, but now we're doing it with the edge of the button. Okay, so now we have sewn all the way around our little button. My button is covering all those little gathered edges, and now we can end off this thread. So I'm just gonna do like a few little like scoop knots around this gather here, and then I'm gonna tuck my tail on the inside. Okay, so now we are finished with most of the construction of the mouse. We've added the hanger and the button. Now we need to add all the little extras. So on this one, there are Rudolph's nose, reins, and whiskers. So let's start with the reins. And the pattern recommends you to get about 10 inches of DMC 321, and you're gonna use all 6 strands for this. So you might have to get a bigger needle, depending on what size you're using. And we are also going to knot one end of the floss. And I realized just now that I forgot 2 stitches. There are supposed to be some red stitches somewhere along here. So I'm gonna look at my pattern to figure out where those would be. But hopefully you have done those and you know exactly where they are. All right, so I am just inserting my needle through the seam, and I'm coming out where that red cross stitch would be. Yours is hopefully there and you are not having the same issue. And we're just gonna pull it through, and that knot kind of gets sucked in there. And so now we are going to go in down by this gold bead here, and we're gonna need to come out by the other gold bead. So you're gonna insert your needle like through the whole body of the mouse. And you're gonna wanna leave some slack in the floss here because that's like makes the little reindeer loop. The reins loop, I mean. All right, so now that we've done that, we're gonna go across the belly of the mouse and we're gonna just repeat that same stitch to kind of create a back stitch, which will help lock our little reins into place. I'm gonna try to keep my finger in that loop so that I can keep the slack as well. So basically you're making a back stitch here, a big one. Now we're gonna complete the other side of the rein. So again, you should have a red stitch like below the eye. I did not do that. So I'm gonna guesstimate again. All right, so I have found where my red stitch should be. Again, you're just going to come up in the center of that seam. And we're gonna do another knot. And now I'm going to just tie another little tiny knot here. Okay, so now I've tied that knot. I'm just gonna use a little bit of glue. I had to go get my big bottle because my little bottle was empty. And this is just Eileen's tacky glue. You can find it at any craft store. You probably have some laying around. If not, I think you could also use like Fray Check if you have that, or if you have just even like white Elmer's glue, that would probably work too. But I'm just gonna take a little bit on a Q-tip and I'm just gonna dab it on that knot so that that does not come undone. Does not, get it? We will give that a second to dry and then you can trim off your ends of floss there. All right, the glue is not totally dry, but I am just gonna go ahead and snip my little ends. That is apricot, unsurprisingly. Our next step is to add the whiskers. So this is where you're gonna take your sewing thread, or I'm gonna use the Sulky, or if you don't have either of those, you can just use DMC. You're gonna wanna take I'm gonna cut mine about, I don't know, 6 inches long, and you're gonna want to have 2 strands. So this is where I'm going to stray from the instructions. The instructions has you attaching the whiskers without any knots. That scares me, so I'm not gonna do that. I am going to tie a little knot at one end. And then I'm gonna thread my needle. And now we're gonna figure out where the whiskers go based on the pattern. So on the pattern, there's 2 little dots. You'll just refer to those and you'll go in the one side and out the other side. They're gonna be on either side of the nose. And then I'm going to do like a knot like this. I don't know what that kind of knot is called. And we're gonna double knot it on this side to keep our little whiskers in place. And we're gonna trim those ends. And we're just gonna repeat the same thing, but you're gonna wanna do it opposite because these whiskers are, you know, a little more wild than the other side. So we'll do that, and then we will trim the whiskers so that they all are the same length. All right, so I've knotted my one end. I'm going in the opposite side that I started on last time, and I'm coming up right next to it. And if you don't like how that looks, you don't have to do it that way. You can follow the pattern. I just am very concerned about my whiskers becoming undone. All right, so we have 4 whiskers on each side. We're gonna wanna make them all about 1/2 inch long. So I'm just gonna do that by gathering all of the whiskers on one side, doing a little trim. And we'll do the same on the other side. I actually might go back and make those a little bit shorter. Okay, so now our mouse has whiskers. The last part is attaching the bead for Rudolph's little red nose. The pattern says that you should take a straight pin and stick it through the center, and then stick that right down into the mouse through the nose, and then you would color the end of the straight pin red. I don't have that kind of pin, I only have these kind, and those aren't gonna work for this. So I'm gonna try to attach mine with thread, but this should be a very easy step if you had the necessary things. I just don't. So I'm gonna take some of my DMC 321. All right, so I'm just coming up through like where the seam's at, and I'm just gonna come up right in the point of that pink little nose. And I'm gonna do a loop method, but you don't have to do it that way. You could tie a knot and hide it in the seam. And I'm going to just scoop up the bead. Pull that all the way to the end. Catch my loop. And I think I'm gonna go on each side too, and then we can knot it and hide that inside. So we went over the top, and now I think I'm gonna try to go down each side, but if that doesn't work, at least one side should keep it secure. All right, so now I'm just gonna go down and knot my thread and tuck that knot inside, and then we'll be done. And okay, so I did a couple little knots. I'm just gonna go back through the seam, and I'm gonna come out, I think I'll come out down here. And we're done. So obviously that nose is not quite as neat as it would be with a pin, but it's secure, it's on there, and that knot is hidden on the inside. We've got our wild little whiskers and little reindeer reins, and now you have a new ornament for your Christmas tree. I hope this tutorial was helpful for you. If you have any other tips for doing these mice, please leave them down below. I am still relatively new at them, but I hope seeing the step-by-step walkthrough helped you understand a little bit more about how these little friends are constructed. If you have any questions, put them down in the comment section as well, and I will do my best to answer them. And I hope you had a lot of fun, and please feel free to join us for the rest of the Naughty or Mice Stitch Along. And you can tag me on Instagram as well as Allie from Misfit Stitches. I'll link both of our Instagrams below. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your holiday season. I will hopefully see you next week sometime with another regular Flosstube update, but until then, happy stitching!